when I was doing the walkthrough, you can't actually see the elevator anymore, but you can see the opening in the floor where it would come up. So I don't know if the elevator is grounded on the first floor or where it is, but you can see where it would have come up. I'm not even sure what kind of elevator it is. I want to look into that further because I didn't even remember elevators in there. But when I was reading, it was like there's 3 elevators. And I'm like, I don't remember those. So maybe they were just behind a door.
Very interesting.
Right? Probably another one of those doors you have to open to find things.
Yeah, secret door to the hidden elevator. Yeah.
That's it, to the hidden elevator. And so the 3rd floor seems to be what they talk about as most active. So it seems to have the most paranormal activity. Guides and people who work in there don't particularly like going to the 3rd floor when it starts to get dark. They say they hear footsteps all the time up there, especially in the long hallway, because it's sort of, you come up a servant staircase to a landing, and if you go left, you can see there's sort of an apartment in front of you, and then there's, it's quite expansive, and the apartments are really, really quite nice. Like they're a sitting room and a bedroom kind of setup. So you have space. It's not a tiny little room where they just shoved a bed in there. And we can see that, clearly she cared dearly for her servants. So she obviously wanted them to be as comfortable in their off time, whenever that would have been, to be able to have enough space to feel comfortable. And you can see that on the 3rd floor. It's quite interesting. Although the 3rd floor is quite a maze of quite a maze of random rooms, and again, sort of, I think when you're walking through, some of it isn't open to the public currently because I suspect it needs more further renovation. So you're sort of looking at areas where it's like, where does that go? And then there's strange little alcoves that have doors, but there's clearly nothing behind the door, and you can sort of tell that there's nothing behind the door. But this was sort of the thought is this 3rd floor has the most activity. And for me, I have found that most often in these manor houses and even Casa Loma, the servant staircase, and we talked about the Customs House last week, and that's the same thing, that servant staircase in the Customs House has the same kind of energy to it, right? You can feel, it's almost like you can feel brushing you by as you go up these staircases. You can feel that energy. And some of it, I wonder, if it's not residual energy, because the house holds that energy too.
Well, of course. Right? Not all of it is intelligent spirit energy.
That's right. So
in a building like Winchester, there would be tons of residual energy floating around.
Right, and
that energy,
and you have
it gets absorbed into the wood itself. The wood is a conductor
into
for
the structure,
residual energy. Sure. And over the years, the servants and anything that ever happened, that energy would just get absorbed into the wood itself.
Right, yeah, and it's like I say, the homes hold so much, and that's something as well that you feel when you go into a place, and if you're perceptive to this, you will feel like, oh, that doesn't feel good. Like I was saying about the room in the Custom House on the staircase where that young servant girl was, attacked. That energy remains in that staircase. Like you can feel it, right? It's like every ounce of wood in that room absorbs that moment in her life. And so if you're perceptive of that, you'll feel that energy. And I think that's why some people, when they go into old homes, they feel like, it's haunted without it actually being haunted by, like you said, an intelligent or, a spirit that can actually communicate or just is present in the space, as opposed to residual energy. And
it's the residual
I
energy.
Feel residual. Oh, yeah. So, like I said, I would want to go back here, too. I mean, when I was 17, I wasn't really understanding what was going on in my realm of, things that I was able to perceive. I kind of knew what was going on, but I didn't really have the same perception that I have today. And I didn't know how to decipher what I was feeling or, that. So, so this would be one of these places where it would just be like, oh, God. And how do you go through? I'd need the entire day. I think I'd need days to go through it.
Yeah, well, the place is so crazy. You'd have to take several days if you could. To try to go through it.
Yeah, like, I'd almost want to split it into 3 days. It's like, okay, day one, I'm doing the first floor. Day
Yeah,
two, I'm
yeah.
going to get to the second floor. Day three, I'm going to get to the third floor. And then I'd need a day just to, go around the outside of the house. I mean, obviously now it's very, it's very much surrounded by the urban, growth of San Jose. But I'm
yes,
sure
indeed.
just the property itself would still have some energy associated with it that would have been, over the years still there. But also, too, now, because there's been millions of people going through the house, it might be difficult to decipher the house's residual energy from the person's.
Yeah, indeed, because you've now got the residual energy of all those people going through.
Right.
How many hundreds of thousands of footsteps have walked across those wooden floors? And
yes.
yeah.
I mean, more so, there's probably more current residual energy than energy from the past, right? Now that the house has sort of been inundated with millions of people walking through. So, I'm kind of always interested in locations like that because for me, that really is a challenge for my gifts of perception, for me to be able to pick out who may have been, the energy. Is that their energy that I'm feeling, or is that someone who's brought something into the space? So, it becomes a challenge in that respect. And I think that's why, as paranormal investigators, that we appreciate it when we can go in and do a controlled investigation.
Yes.
Because it allows us a little bit more opportunity to get through that other energy, that outside energy that has, now sort of permeated the space, right? I mean, for the most part, when somebody walks through, I mean, we all are an energy signature anyway. So when we walk through, some people may leave more behind than others. Some people may leave nothing behind, right? I mean, that's just it. But when you have that many people going through, it would be quite difficult to decipher. And that's why sometimes I feel like, something like the Winchester Mystery House, I would have to do my own investigations on my, with a team or on my own time without a bunch of people around me.
Right. You've got to eliminate that contamination.
Mm-hmm. Although I have to say I have been on these tours before. Inside Casa Loma is different now, but I've been on tours of historical homes and places like that where there's been quite a lot of people on the tour, and yet somehow I am still able to communicate with the original occupants. So they find me.
Well, that's good.
They do find me. So, yeah, so I'd be really curious as to that, right? But, it's such an interesting such an interesting way to perceive it. And I do like in the film how they showed the damage that was suffered in the earthquake, and,
right.
The effects that it had on Sarah herself, and how, it sort of affected the servants as well, right? So that's it. And the house is now, definitely shorter than it used to be because there's 3 floors missing.
Yes, because of the earthquake. Yep.
Yeah. So can you imagine, like, what was it, 6 stories high at one point?
7 stories.
7. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Prior to the earthquake, it was 7 stories.
Wow. Yeah. So imagine, like, it must have been almost double the size that it is currently.
Yeah, and just looking up some information here. The property at that time was 162 acres.
Okay, wow, yeah, because
compared
farm,
to what
right?
it is today of 4 or 5 acres. 162.
Right. Yeah,
as you say,
wow.
is the current demographics of San Jose built up around it now, but.
Mm-hmm. And I find that really interesting, right? So I'm looking now at some of the hauntings that have actually been noted in of the property. So it does say that Winchester tore down the top 3 damaged floors and spent more time on her houseboat that was nearby as they continued to build the house out. In 1922, she died of heart failure in her bedroom at the Winchester house. She was 82. So some of the hauntings that have been mentioned. So a few of them, like Harry Houdini visited. Okay, so it does say that he visited after Winchester's death to debunk spiritualists. But that's one thing. And then it says the ghost stories continue today. But, spiritualism and paranormal and ghosts and all of that, while it's one element of it, it isn't all of it. So, for people who, spiritualists were sort of really a thing in the 1800s and early 1900s. And while there's still spiritualists out there, I think that it's moved beyond just, their sort of look at things. I mean, the Fox sisters, all of those things did not help the spiritualists, right? As the things move forward. But so there's apparently a ghost known as the wheelbarrow ghost. And he wears white overalls and he works on the house. So he's, I guess, pushing a wheelbarrow around with who knows what in it. People often say that they feel only good energy there, and it's not negative. They don't feel any negative energy. There is another reference to the 3rd floor apparition, who apparently is maybe the one that they hear the footfalls, the footsteps in the evening on the floor in the hallway. She may have been the housekeeper, because while there was servant staff, there was an overall housekeeper to manage the house. So, and her office was up there on the 3rd floor as well. So it may very well be that, that could be her that's walking upstairs. Now, in the movie, I don't really remember all of the kind of ghosts that came and went in the film. I think that I think some of those were just created for the film, right?
Yeah, well, what I remember about the film is the ghostly entities in the story are of the story of those men that were killed by the Winchester rifles.
Right. Okay. So that was sort of what they brought into the film, was the sort of those struggling apparitions, those spirits that didn't pass over because of the use of the Winchester, right?
That's right.
So, okay. So I'm of the, again, it's a possibility. I can't say yes or no to that, right? I don't, because I mean there are references to that, of course, the spirits that appease the house. And if you go on the Winchester Mystery House site, they do cite that, different spelling, of the those who had fallen to the Winchester rifle. But I kind of like Houdini's take on it too. Like, I really believe that there must have been something that propelled Sarah to do this. And again, both of those possibilities exist, and they both have some credibility, I suppose, in terms of why somebody would.
It's hard to say. It really is hard to say. Who knows? I guess that's something, one day we'll have to do, is go there and set up a paranormal investigation, and we'll find out for ourselves.
So I want to go back to sort of the history of it, too, because I think it's sort of important to get sort of an aspect on the history of things. So really, Sarah's husband, he died from tuberculosis in 1881. And at that time, she inherited $20.5 million in 1881.